Hi, welcome everyone. I hope you have grabbed yourself a cup of tea and welcome to this, the first in our series of Fertility and the Arts mini sessions. We're really pleased, Fertility Network, to be introducing our really dear friend, Jessica Hepburn, to you today. We're going to be talking a little bit about her journey and her involvement with the arts and how that matters and why that matters now. If you do have any questions, do send them in. If not, send them in and we can send them on to Jessica. But it's going to be a very informal half an hour just talking with a very dear friend and yeah, hearing a little bit about her story. So over to you, my lovely friend. Like I said, I'm very disappointed there's no cup of tea in your hand, but we'll have to pretend.
I was suddenly in a, actually, just before we came online, I was chatting to Gabby, who's my co-director of FertilityFest. Yeah, so it was a bit of a race to come. I have to start by saying, Anya, I do love your Zoom environment with that exposed brick. It's looking very nice.
It's North London. You can't take the girl out of North London, I'm afraid. It's my very... Right, anyway, we're going to waffle otherwise. Amazing woman. Tell me a little bit. I obviously know, being your friend and having read the books, but for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about your fertility story, starting wherever you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of often think everyone's fertility story is unique, but also we all share so much as well. So my particular story was, I mean, I'd always wanted a family, but I also wanted a career, and I did what all, for those who are listening, Anya and I went to the same school, although we weren't in the same year, but we went to school, you know, we were encouraged to go to university, get on the career ladder, be picky about finding a man, and it wasn't until I was in my early 30s, I was running the Lyric Hammersmith, which is a big theatre in West London, that I thought, right, now's the time to have a family. And I thought it was the perfect age. And we threw away the contraception. After a year, nothing had happened. We made our first foray to a fertility clinic. We were diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which I think is possibly well, I always say it's one of the worst diagnoses, because, you know, like, everything looks like it's working, but it's not.
Totally agree.
And then that was the start of what became a decade-long struggle to conceive that involved a total of 11 rounds of unsuccessful IVF. I seemed to be able to get pregnant. We created perfect embryos, but they didn't, you know, I lost them early on or later on. And I also had an ectopic pregnancy, you know, where the fetus was in my abdomen, that was really serious. And so it's a, you know, but this is where it is similar to people's stories. Everyone is different, but, you know, people who are on this roller coaster are often on it for a long time. And, you know, it is one of the most emotional and physically draining journeys I've ever been on. And we'll talk a bit more about, you know, what then brought me to here. But that's my fertility story.
So it lasted over about 10 years, did you say?
Yeah. So we started trying to conceive just after my 34th birthday, and our last rounds of IVF, which was our 11th, was just before my 43rd birthday.
Wow. What really strikes me, and I think I sometimes get this when I'm talking about my fertility journey, it's very easy for us to talk about it quite, not matter-of-factly, but to give that broad picture of what happens, because we're used to talking about it now. But actually to live through it, it's so painful, isn't it, that it's almost hard to communicate that part of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think, I mean, that's what you've said is absolutely true, Anya, because you and I mean, obviously even though we went to the same schools, we didn't know each other until we discovered that we've both been on this fertility journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, and of course we do talk about it a lot, and it has now become, but for both of us, our work.
Yeah.
But like, for years, literally years, I did not tell anybody what I was going through. You know, publicly, I was a successful career woman, but privately, I was on this desperate mission to become a mother. And, you know, I often think about like what, something I've thought about a lot, you know, why couldn't I be open about it? Why was I suffering for so long in silence? And I think, you know, I felt like, you know, and one of the things I've realized the moment you do start talking about it and start sharing your experiences with others, you realize that you're not alone, and that actually everybody experiences the same or a combination of the same feelings. And one of them definitely as a woman is that you feel, and men feel this as well, that somehow you're not you're not a proper woman because you can't do what every other woman finds so easy to do. And then the other, you know, like really common thing is, you know, I was in my early 30s. I thought it was the perfect age. All my friends were just starting to try for babies, then they would get pregnant, and you're surrounded by people who, you know, are getting pregnant, you know, baby announcements, scam photos, you know, baby showers, christening,
so painful.
and you know, it's just so hard because they are where you want to be, and yet you are not there. And you also hope that, you know, next month it's going to be over, and you know, you're going to be part of that. And then I also think, and this is something that I've talked about quite a bit, that I just, you know, I also felt like women had fought for so long to be seen as more than wives and mothers, that somehow the fact that this was now the only thing that I wanted was, and I didn't feel like I could be happy without it, was kind of somehow a betrayal, you know, of this amazing career that women before me had fought so hard for me to have. And I think that was really hard as well. So you know, these were, but there's no doubt that you know, that the moment I mean, obviously I will come on to talk about this, but really everything changed for me because I wrote a book about what I was going through. My first book, which was called The Pursuit of Motherhood. And like, I wrote that partly as a sort of catharsis for myself, but also partly because I didn't feel that this story was being told. And then the moment that went out into the world, I mean, obviously there was no being secret any longer, and suddenly, like, my story was there, and then that changed everything in so many ways for me.
But what gave you, I often think about you with that, there's a real before and after, isn't there?
Yeah,
What was it a slow burn realization that actually you needed to talk, or was it an epiphany moment? What moved you from actually I need this to be quite private and my story to I have to start talking about this?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's true that there was a before and after. There was the before the world knew, and then there was after the world knew. But also, what is also true is there was this middle bit where I started writing. So I mean, I'm even though I've worked in the arts all my life, and we're going to come on to talk about FertilityFest. You know, I've never, until I started writing, I never considered myself as an artist. I wasn't a writer. You know, I'd write reports for work, but I didn't write creatively. And I started writing because, like, if I'm really honest, it became a cathartic process, but I started writing because I felt like this is a story that needs to be told. And it's a brilliant story. You know, it's full of like highs and lows. And when I started writing, I was like still sort of very much in the middle of our treatment, and I thought like there would be a happy ending. I really, you know, the conventional happy ending of like we would eventually have the miracle, you know, double line, and so the middle bit of the story was this writing. What I discovered was that I loved writing. And so that's become, you know, one of my passions in, you know, that I've discovered that maybe I would have never discovered. And that was amazing. And then there came this point, I'd written this book, and like, what was I going to do with it? You know, and then I had to sort of like, you know, step off the cliff. And I think what drove me to do that, and when I say step off the cliff, I mean step off the cliff and, you know, decide that you were going to give it to other people to read. And I think the thing that really drove me about that is that I really wanted to see some stuff changed in the world of fertility. And, you know, I often tell this story that I've considered very seriously about bringing it out under a pseudonym.
Yes, I remember you saying that.
Myself, Jessica Harper.
Yeah.
It's my grandmother's maiden name. And,
it's a good name. It's a good name.
And then my editor did this Google search. He found this Jessica Harper defrauded Lloyds Bank for £1 million, said it wasn't worth the mix-up. So, and then I just thought, actually, to be honest, you know, like, I have to be honest that this is my story, and I can only, and I want to see some things changed, and I can only really do that if I'm prepared to own up to this being my story. And so that's what I did. And
amazing. That's really amazing. What strikes me is, it for many people actually, it's that the compulsion to help and to be part of the process rather than a strong desire in yourself per se. I'm going to totally paraphrase this wrong, but Meghan Markle today has broken the silence about you know, all the issues going on in America, and she said, I've really struggled the last few days because I don't want to say the wrong thing. But she said, and I'm going to paraphrase this wrong, but she said, but she was reminded of a teacher that said to her, actually, don't let the fear of doing something wrong stop you from helping other people.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that compulsion, that even though actually what it feels very nerve-wracking for you to have jumped off that cliff, or for you to have gone, okay, this is my truth, this is my story, but you knew that it was a story that needed to be told. So I think that's an incredible driver, and I think that's one of the key things that's come out of Fertility Fest, which leads me on to please tell us all about this amazing project, which is so unique and I've got loads of stories that I could tell you about women and men who've been transformed through it, but tell us about Fertility Fest.
And Anya, thank you, because you've been with us since the beginning of it. Well, after I wrote my book, like, this idea was bubbling away. I mean, like, I always joke that, like, I thought, I mean, like, I'm sort of saying this jokingly, but I'm also sort of saying this seriously, which is, I just thought the only people that had ever written about infertility creatively was me, or made work about fertility creatively, was me and Frida Kahlo, the artist, the amazing artist.
Yeah.
And then the reality, when I brought my book out, and I think this is partly because I was working in the arts, I was running this big theatre, is that actually, you know, there were artists all over the country, in fact, all over the world, not huge amounts of them, but a significant amount of them, and that is increasing all the time, and that's the brilliant thing, that were making work about their own fertility stories. And as I said at the beginning, you know, like, mine is my particular story, but, you know, that one of the things about fertility and infertility and IVF, reproductive science, is that there are so many different stories. People started contacting me about, you know, work that they were doing, whether that was books that they were writing or had written, or plays, or films and visual art. And that was where the idea of maybe bringing all this, like, work together in a festival context came from, and that was sort of the seed of the idea that became Fertility Fest. The other thing that happened, and I mentioned her earlier, is that Gabby Vautier, who is my co-director of the festival and who was a theatre colleague before that, and we knew that we'd both been on this fertility journey, and Gabby went on a sort of 5-year journey. She now has 5-year-old twins, IVF twins. Her husband is the playwright Gareth Farr. I think you're going to talk to him as part of these series.
Yes,
and he had written a play that wasn't about them, but was based on their experience, called The Quiet House. And Gabby, who's a theatre producer, was going to produce this play, and she knew I had the idea for the festival, and so there was a sort of, I suppose, a beautiful bringing together of these two ideas, which became like the first year. But I have to say, the first year was like tiny. I mean, we had the show, which ran in Birmingham and London, and the festival was one day in Birmingham and one day in London. And then over a period of 3 years, sort of culminating last year, it just grew like exponentially. So last year we were at the Barbican, and we had this huge show on the main stage with the amazing actress Maxine Peake, which transferred to Sydney. And we've also been working with ESHRA, which is the largest fertility industry conference in the world. We should be in Copenhagen with the festival now. And also the Fertility Show, which is the biggest patient event.
Yeah.
It just sort of like snowballed into this, you know, thing that we never imagined, and you know, it's just been so exciting.
And was so brilliant. It is without doubt one of the things that I am most proud of being involved with by far in any work that I've ever done. Some of the patient stories and people's stories that came out of it, people that had just, you know, fought to get to this festival because they knew they had to be there, and that compulsion to be with other people, it was magic. And I'll never forget the first year. We were quite squashed, weren't we, in the venue, but there was something quite wonderful about that as well. It just felt like this little cocoon of all trying to work things out together. It was amazing. So what would be, go on, sorry.
No, you go on.
What are some of the, you know, I could waffle on about Fertility Fest for hours, so I'll stop. What would be some of the key things that you've learned from it? What's it taught you?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was going to respond to what you just said about, you know, people, is that I think one of the really big things it did, and I do think this is changing and happening more, is that, but it brought people together sort of in a live environment for the first time, where they started to share. So seeing the work of, so the format for those people who don't know is that you would see a piece of work, whether that's a little bit of a theatre, I mean, you might see a whole theatre show, but you might see a reading or a piece of visual art, a presentation, and then there will be a discussion with experts and the audiences. And like, I think, and I mean, you tell me if you agree, that it was the first time really there had been any sort of form of live event where sort of patients, the public, artists, experts started to sort of really share. And so one of the comments that we got, because there's always been a lot of communication online, and I think that's been a real lifeline for people, and I think it will continue to be. But there was something about being in the same room, sitting side by side with people, where you just knew that everybody understood your experience, and would give you a hug, or you know, would hold your hand in an emotional moment, was there rooting for you. And I think that was what was really, really, you know, unique and special about it. The other thing that I think we've really learned is that both Gabby and I are, you know, to be frank, you know, we're white, 30-something women who were both diagnosed with unexplained infertility, and were going through conventional IVF to try and conceive, you know, we're both in heterosexual relationships and trying to conceive with our partners. And so obviously in the first year, you know, like, that the work was quite driven. Well, I mean, it's always been driven by the artists that have come to us, but I would say, like, that was our main experience, and a lot of the conversations were around that. What we realized after the first year is, there are so many things to discuss. So by the third year, like, the level of dialogue had just exploded. So, you know, we had a whole strand called the queer family, you know, same-sex couples or singles creating families using this science have a very different story and experience than, say, Gabby or I. And then we have this whole other strand called race, religion and reproduction, which opens up a whole other area of discussion. And then we've got women who are like conceiving on their own, or and then there's the whole sort of unlocking the invisible man and the male experience. So what happened really with the festival is that it just sort of grew, you know, with all these different stories. I mean, and it could continue to grow, you know, because fertility affects everybody in some shape or form.
And the tagline changed, didn't it, to become this much more encompassing thing. So share with us what the tagline was.
Yeah, so, well, now it's, you know, the world's first arts festival dedicated to fertility, infertility, the science of making babies and modern families. So it isn't, you know, like, one of the things whenever I give talks is that, like, reproductive science is not about infertility. You know, it was traditionally, you know, Louise Brown, the first IVF baby, was born as a result of this science because her mother and father needed the science to help them conceive. But actually, reproductive science and modern family making is much broader than that now. And people using the science, you know, may have no fertility problems. And we really, but there are still stories to be told and issues to be worked through. And that is what, you know, like we wanted to acknowledge and celebrate.
And it came out so clearly, that inclusivity. I'll never forget the times that you would really champion people's different experiences, and any time that there was a bit of a sense of any hint to the hierarchy of my pain being more than your pain or my experience, you've been so good at stepping in and saying, actually, this is a really inclusive festival. And I think there's something, that's what I wanted to come on to as we come towards the end of this, is, you know, why the arts? What, in some ways that's a really simplistic question, but untangle it a little bit. How and why do the arts give that space to talking about these difficult emotions?
I just think the arts, in the broadest sense, whether that's theatre, dance, music, literature, film, visual art, you know, they are an extraordinary way of telling the stories of our lives, you know, in a way that, you know, connects with us emotionally, intellectually, and that is their power. And, you know, and that is what then unlocks the ability to have conversations about, that is what I'm experiencing too, or God, I didn't understand that you felt like that, to that needs to change, you know, and then it can start to have, you know, that's when the arts then starts to have an impact on individual life and also on societal, you know, issues. So I think it just, at a simple level, that's what the arts does beautifully. And just that thing, I just wanted to go back to that thing, Anya, that you said about, you know, the hierarchy of people's pain. I mean, one of the things that, like, Gabby and I have, we always say we're the two sides of the IVF story. She's got IVF twins. I was not successful and haven't had children. But we share more than what separates us. We've both been through that experience, and we very much wanted, and I want to, one of the reasons why I want to stay at the heart of the fertility industry is that we want to, you know, honor everyone's experience and everyone's sort of whatever their outcome is, because even when you have the conventional happy ending, which I thought I was going to have, I mean, I've had my own happy ending, but even when you have the conventional happy ending, you know, you've still lived an experience that has touched your life and changed your life, you know, irrevocably.
Absolutely. And do you know what is magic about that? Just thinking about all the powerful emotional repercussions, but actually Fertility Fest had some pretty tangible repercussions, didn't it, in terms of impacting the fertility sector and the wider society discussions. You know, some of the media things that were put out during that really helped shape people's perceptions. So it wasn't just, not that there is a just with the emotional reaction to some of this, but I really saw some tangible things that's come in.
Oh, definitely. I think the biggest thing is, you know, we're now, like, there is now a recognition that you have to both the psychological as well as the physical aspects of this treatment, and that both need to be considered.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, more needs to be done in terms of patient emotional, psychosocial support, absolutely. But I think that, you know, that wasn't even really properly recognised. I think Fertility Fest,
no,
as well as the work that other organisations have been doing, like Fertility Network UK, hand in hand, we've seen a total transformation in understanding that.
Well, even things like the HFEA now putting into its guidance that there has to be minimum standards for the emotional welfare of patients.
Yeah,
you know, that was part of the discussion. Fertility Fest, fertility show, all of these things, but you know, 5-10 years ago that wasn't there, whereas now that's seen as a bedrock of good patient care. I'm just going to read to you, we have had one lovely comment come in, I'll read to you, and then I've got one very super quick question. Someone's put, anonymous, loving your discussion, only just learning about this wonderful Fertility Fest. You are amazing. Yes, she is. We'll definitely be going along once we can. It would be great to hear stories from women with mental health who are also having IVF. Also stories from people who are having IVF at such a crazy time. Yeah. I fit under both of those stories. Journaling over these past 3 rounds is helping me so much. Good luck to you. Thank you, whoever's written that. That's brilliant. I want to just ask one super quick question because we've got 2 minutes. What's next for the amazing Jessica Hepburn? I know what you were meant to be doing at the moment. You can share with that.
Chance, but to end on a cliffhanger.
What next?
We haven't even had a chance to talk about this, but I mean, obviously, you know that the other thing that I've done is I've started to take on these huge physical challenges. This is my happy ending. I swam the channel, ran the marathon, and right now I should be on Mount Everest. And so what's next for me is that I'm writing my 3rd book, and I'm still training hard in the hope that I'll get to Everest next year. But the one, and I'm also very much, I'm working closely with the Fertility Show. We hope the Fertility Fest will be part of the Fertility Show that hopefully we're going to run at some point. We want hopefully in November, which is when it should be. But so I would encourage people, if they're not already following Fertility Fest or Fertility Show or me on social media channels, do. And and keep up with what's happening. But one thing that I would say, just as a final finish, which is that my fertility journey prepared me well for lockdown. And in terms of living life in limbo is something that, you know, I have to say that actually going through that fertility journey makes you really strong to manage. So it's all good.
Amazing. Only you, Jessica, could throw out I've swum the channel, I've run a marathon, and I should be up Mount Everest, and make it sound like I should be in Asda right now. I love it.
But we only had 2 minutes.
It's great. No, but that's still you anyway. I could give you an hour and you'd still go, yeah, I've swum the channel. That in and of itself, that was my breaking point during Fertility Fest, was the video of you swimming the channel, and I cried so hard that I made the chair rock backwards and forwards. It's been such a joy talking to you, always. Thank you for what you're doing in this sector. Thank you for leading the way in so many ways, and thank you for being our first person on the Arts and Fertility.
Thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure, Anya. Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. Take care. Bye.